Okay, so we're going to look at writing methods, our own methods here in this video. We talked about this in class, but in case you weren't here or you need to revisit it, I thought I'd make a short video. So I have here a working program, public class methods, and right now I just have the main methods, so it's kind of our typical Hello World program. So the first thing you want to do is make sure where you're going to actually put the method. And it can go before or after the main method. The order in which those two appear do not matter, but it has to be at the same level as the main method, meaning it's inside your class. So I have my outside braces here for my class. That's why convention, lining things up is important. And then I have my main method, which has braces here. So at this kind of level, one indentation in. I don't want to put a method inside a method. That's not going to work. So it's at the same level. Like I said, it doesn't matter if it's before or after. So for right now, let me just tell you the first two words. We'll eventually talk about what they really mean, but for now, let's just kind of go with the idea that you just need them. The next word is just as important, and we need it. You can see in the main method there it's void, but that actually means something that I can actually explain to you here. The method itself, when it does its job, it could possibly give you a value back or give you something back. And that's called a return. And what you need to type here when you're writing the method is what type of thing this method is going to return. And the methods we're going to write for the most part here in the beginning are not going to return anything. And so if it doesn't return anything, it's called a void method. Its return type is void. So I'll put the word void here. The next word or identifier is actually the name of the method. And by convention, we start with a lowercase, and we use camel case after that. You can call it whatever you want. You can't use a reserved word, and of course main is a bad choice also. In class, I use this example, and I'll use it here just to prove it could be anything. I'll call it Fred. And then every method has parentheses after it. Whether you're using the method or calling the method, or whether you're writing the method. So I need parentheses. And now what goes in the parentheses, where my cursor right now is blinking, is what we would call the arguments. And so basically, what does the method need to do its job? Think of, for example, the math method square root. In order to do its job of finding the square root, you'd have to pass it the number that you want to find the square root of. So, possibly we could put a variable here. We'll do a method that takes in a parameter also in this video, but for now let's just leave it blank. Now there's no semicolon at the end of this, what's called a method header. It's kind of like the title line of a method. We call it the method header. And there's no semicolon because what you're going to do is follow it immediately up with braces. And one of the things I said is if your next character that you type is an open brace, then you should not be using a semicolon. And so I can put anything I want in here. Let's keep it pretty simple and put our own system out here. And we'll just put Fred so we know the Fred method actually ran. And so you can see I have no errors. This is legitimate code here. And I did this in class, and I'll do it again just for those people that need to kind of hear it again, is that if I run this, the only thing that's going to run is my hello world. And the reason is the only method that actually gets called automatically is the main method. So when we start this in Eclipse, Java looks for the main method and it runs this. So all it's doing is printing out hello world. There's this extra code here, but it's never being accessed. So if I want to access this method, what I need to do is I need to call the method. And so when you're calling a method, and we're going to say this over and over and over, there's three things that you should really worry about when you're calling a method. And one is the return type of the method that you're calling. Because if, for example, it's going to return you something, like the math square root method returns you a value, a number, which is the square root of the number you passed it. So you might want to either print that out or you might want to actually store it in a variable. And so if I expected it to give me back an int my Fred method, I would probably store it in for an int. But we know that I made this method, this Fred method, void, so it's not going to return me anything. So therefore, I can't store the results of this method in for any variable, or I can't even try to print out. I can't print out the results of the Fred method because it's not going to give me anything back to print out. So that's the first thing, and that might be more of an issue that we can talk about when we actually do write a method that has a return type. But the other two are very important to us right now. And the first thing, and so I'm going to call the Fred method, and you can see I put parentheses because I said you always use parentheses whether you're going to use them or not. And the second question is very important, is does the method take any arguments in? And so what you need to know is this is a one-to-one match. When you're writing the Fred method, or if it's a pre-written method that somebody else wrote, you need to look what arguments does it take in. Because if it doesn't take any arguments in, like my Fred method, then I can't pass it any arguments. If I tried to pass it like the number 3, I would get an error because there is no Fred method that takes in an integer. The only Fred method it can find doesn't take anything in, so I can't give it anything to the method. Now, the last question was one that we asked ourselves when we were doing the square root method, for example. And in order to use the square root method, you needed to tell Java where to find the square root method. So you might remember it was in the math class, so we typed out math.square root. And so it knew to look in the math class to find that method. Now, it turns out we could do this. We can go methods.Fred. So it knows to find the Fred method in the methods class. And this would run. And you can see we'll print out our hello world Fred. So that would work. And maybe that's a good idea to always explicitly state what class the method is from. But you should actually at least understand and be used to this idea that if the method I'm calling is in the class that I'm writing, I need not give it an explicit path. I can just leave it like this. So it still knows Fred is a method because of the parentheses, and it'll look within its own class to find it. And since it finds it here, it will run just fine. So either way. But if the method I'm writing is not in, or trying to call or use, I should say, if the method I'm trying to use or call is not in the class itself, then you must always give an explicit argument there to tell it where to find the method. All right, so let's just write one more real quick here, just so you can see how this works. And so I'll write one more public static. We're going to stick with that. We're going to stick with void methods right now. We'll call this one Mary, and this one is going to take in a number. Now, when you're writing the method, you're kind of setting things up. You're telling the user what you expect to happen. And so if I'm going to take in a number, I need to tell Java that I'm going to take in a number, and you do it by, first of all, saying the type of what you expect to take in. So I'm going to say that I'm going to take in a double, and you need to give it kind of a local variable name. You need to give it a name. So I could say num, something like that. And here I can system dot out line, and I can just print out num. Now, this variable that we created, this num, something you need to know about it. When it's created here as an argument, this variable only exists within this method. If I tried to print out num back in the main method, it would know what it was. This is a local variable that's created temporarily when this method is running. And so let's call it just so you can see it in action, because clearly I didn't call it yet. And now we know when I call this method, it's expecting me to pass a number. If I don't pass the number, it's not going to work. If I try to pass it a string, it's not going to work. It's got to be a number that I pass it. Now I can pass it 4 because you remember that, and then a widening conversion will happen automatically. So when it's passed as 4 in, num would actually become 4.0. Or I could just go ahead and I can pass it a double to start. And so let's run this here. So you can see. So you now know how to create methods. You're going to write the method header. You know how to call methods, and we've talked about parameters, and we can deal with parameters. And again, I'll just say one more time, Mary exists in this class, so I didn't have to put any explicit parameter to call it on, but I could also use the class name because Mary is a method of the methods class, and that would also work just the same. So hopefully that helps a little bit about methods. There'll be more to come. We're just scratching the surface for methods.